Hello music fans, welcome back to another episode of What's New 2022, where I talk about new albums that just came out and give my first impressions on them. You'll see I'm in a different setting today. I'm in my living room instead of my basement, just wanted to change it up. I'm going to be talking about 15 albums that I listened to that came out between November 15th and November 25th. And I'll talk about them in my order of preference, starting with an album from Maxim Micic called Bilo or Bilo 4. Not sure how to pronounce it. This is instrumental progressive metal, at least it's mostly instrumental. It's his fifth album. He's released 3 other albums with the Bilo title, Bilo 1, 2, and 3, and then another album that's not in that sequence of albums. There's some tracks here that feature some guest vocalists. There's a bit of gent guitar playing, but there's also a lot of ambient stuff and really beautiful, peaceful, and serene sounds on here. Some parts sound like they have Asian music influences, and I was just surprised by how amazing this was when I listened to it. I know and love David's work with the band Sordid Pink, which was previously called Destiny Potato, but I never really got into his solo albums until now, and as soon as I heard this, I immediately went back and listened to Bilo or Bilo 3, 2, and 1, all of which are great. Next I'm going to talk about an album from the band Threshold called Dividing Lines, and this is progressive metal. It's their 12th album, and I'm very surprised that I have not heard this progressive metal band until now, given that they've started in 1988, so they're an old school band. They put out their first album in the 90s. I knew they'd be right up my alley as soon as I heard the one single from the album. The whole album was solid. If you're a fan of bands like Dream Theater, Pain of Salvation, and Symphony X, you'll like this. Next, I'm going to talk about an album from the band Elder called Innate Passage. And this is kind of psychedelic, progressive stoner rock with some doom metal influences. It's their 7th album. And this is the only album of theirs that I've heard, but this band sounds kind of like if Mastodon and Baroness met up with Catatonia and Incubus. It's really great stuff, so I highly recommend it if you like the sound of that. 4th album on my list is by the band In the Woods, which came out on their album Diversum came out on November 25th. Elder and Maxim Micic came out on the 25th. Threshold came out on the 18th. So I'm kind of mixing stuff that came out between the 15th and 25th today. This In the Woods album is kind of like, I'd say it's progressive metal, but it's got some like atmospheric black metal influence, as well as some traditional heavy metal, some avant-garde stuff, some prog rock influence. It's their 6th album. It blends a lot of different styles of metal and rock together in a beautiful emotional ride of an album. The clean vocals sound epic. They're really catchy. The screams sound evil and depressed, and are somewhere in between like black metal and death metal in sound. So check that out if you like the sound of that. Next, I'm going to talk about a release that came out on the 15th of November by a band called Dirt Poor Robins, and it's called Queen of the Night. And this is progressive rock, but it has very cinematic and musical theater vibes to it. It's their 8th album. There's great female vocals on this album, and it is prog rock, but it leans heavily into the show tunes and musical theater vibe. Like I said, it accompanies a film they made, so it's kind of like a soundtrack. And I heard about this from another YouTube channel, Nathan on Shuffle, so shout out to that channel for introducing me to this. He rightly calls out that it's reminiscent of when the Deer Hunter goes into their crooner musical theater show tunes or vaudeville vibe, and I could hear that as well. I thought it was really well done. Next, I'll talk about a release from November 18th by a band called Docker's Guild. This is called The Mystic Technocracy Season 2, The Age of Entropy. And it's kind of like a progressive metal rock opera. It's their third album. If you're a fan of bands like Arion and Star One, you'll probably like this. A lot of the songs are in English, but they also have some songs in other languages like French. And there's definitely some kind of concept going on here. There's some spoken word parts. I didn't really follow the whole concept of the album, but I get some sci-fi vibes from it. If you're a fan of bands like Coheed and Cambria, you might like this. It's almost all clean singing, has influence from classic 70s prog like Yes, but there are a couple short moments with death growls that remind me of the band Orphan Land. Next, I'll talk about a release from the band Gandalf's Fist from November 21st called Widdershins, and this is progressive rock. It's their 8th album. It's very nice, classic sounding prog rock. The opening track sounds like kind of hard rock, like Deep Purple, but then there's more folky prog rock songs reminiscent of stuff from the 70s like Yes, Genesis, Jethro Tull, and Gentle Giant. The last song is a 20-minute epic and it's fantastic. And I like how they have both male and female vocals on here. Next up, I've got 5 albums in a row from November 18th. First of which being Mythosphere and their album Pathological. And this is progressive stoner doom metal with some heavy metal and power metal influences. It's their debut album, but this band's kind of got some veteran members. It features past and present members of Beazle, Fuzz, Fate's Warning, and Pale Divine. So check it out if you like any of those bands. The vocals have more of an 80s heavy metal and power metal sounds for fans of bands like Iron Maiden, Queensryche, and Judas Priest, but the riffs are more like Black Sabbath mixed with some more modern stoner doom bands. The song structures have some progressive tendencies as well, so fans of prog metal might like this. Next up, Jared Dines released an album on November 18th called The Grey, and this is kind of progressive metalcore and djenty style. A lot of great djenty riffs. It's his second album. He also has really great guitar leads on it. The vocals are well done too. A lot of screams, but he does some singing too. He's got a lot of guests on here as well, like Austin Dickey, Elise Ridd, and Alex Rudinger, who's a beast of a drummer, and even more guests than that. If you're a fan of bands like Monuments, you'll probably like this. And on the same day, we had the Interbeing releasing Icon of the Hopeless, and this is metalcore. It's their third album. It sounds like some good classic early 2000s metalcore with the riffs, the screams, the clean singing, but it's got a bit more influence from more modern djent sounds as well. And then we have, on the same day, Tallah released The Generation of Danger, and this is metalcore with new metal, hardcore, and alternative influences. It's their second album, and the single Shaken opens with some heavy, kind of almost grindcore, mathcore sounding leads that harmonize a semitone apart and sound really nasty. And after that, it's mostly groovy metalcore with some new metal and hardcore influences, but it ends with a filthy slow breakdown. And this band features Mike Portnoy's son, Max Portnoy, on drums. He's great, but the whole band does a great job, really. It's for fans of bands like Slipknot, Linkin Park. If you take that but combine it with little hints of Dillinger Escape Plan thrown in from time to time, like that kind of chaotic energy and heaviness. They feature turntables, so it's pretty reminiscent of the nu metal era. There's a very small amount of rapping featured as well, but it's more screaming and some singing in terms of vocals. In a weird way, it reminds me of Metallica's Saint Anger as well, because the snare sound is a little bit like that infamous snare to me, or at least that's what it reminded me of. I didn't like listen to both albums and compare them, but when I heard the snare, I was like, oh, that sounds weird. But it doesn't bother me because it actually fits the style they're going for. And on the same day, we had the band called Arc of Life release the album Don't Look Down. and this is progressive rock. It's their second album. This band features 2 members of Yes, John Davison on vocals and Billy Sherwood on bass and vocals as well. And it kind of reminds me of the last 2 Yes albums, especially their last one, The Quest. So if you like that, I think you'll like this. I enjoy it, but I don't think it can touch classic 70s Yes or even the 80s Yes. It's kind of just like a pale imitation to me, and it doesn't quite reach the heights of that. On November 25th, the band Circles released an EP called The Stories We Are Afraid Of. This is progressive metal. And I never listened to this band before, but it's prog metal, so I check it out. And it's very well done. It's just an EP, so it won't make my year-end list or anything, but definitely worth checking out if you're a prog metal fan. Just 2 more to go here, and these 2 are really only if you're a fan of these artists would I recommend them, but the first one is Disturbed, and it's called Divisive, and this is heavy metal with hard rock and alternative influences. It's their 8th album, and I always kind of liked this band back in the early 2000s, but I never really loved them, and that's also how I felt about this album. I don't think it lives up to their past stuff. The vocals are always well executed, guitar riffs and groovy songs. They're well produced, but it's a bit too close to radio rock for me. I think when their cover of Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel became their biggest hit, that left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth, but I'll always appreciate the nostalgia and the meme value of the song Down with the Sickness with the classic opening. Ooh, part. So lastly, I'm going to mention that Rody Walker, the lead singer of Protest the Hero, released an EP called Velocicopter. And this is punk rock kind of with metal, pop, and prog rock influences. It's very kind of silly comedic music from the lead singer of Protest the Hero. It's great performances as always from him, and it's just a fun time. Kind of, I don't take it too seriously, but it's a fun listen, so I recommend it if you're a fan of Rody Walker or Protest the Hero and you just want to hear something else with his vocals on it. And that's it for new releases and my thoughts on them from November 15th to November 25th. Stay tuned for the next one. Until then, peace out.